I was homeless for weeks because of my sister's lie, but then my mom overheard her bragging. If you had asked anyone in my family to describe me when I was 15, they would have probably used the word problem. It was the label they'd stitched onto my skin since I was old enough to have my own opinions. My name is Kyle. I'm 18 now, but the events that redefined my life, that shattered my family and forced me to grow up overnight, all happened in the span of a few brutal weeks when I was 15. Our family operated on a very specific, unspoken set of rules. My father was the undisputed king, and his core belief was that respect was a one-way street that flowed directly to him. You either gave it to him without question, or you faced the consequences. Those consequences usually came in the form of his voice, a booming, rattling thing that could make the windows shake, but on occasion, they came from his actual leather belt. He never saw it as abuse. He called it instilling discipline or building character. What it really built was a constant low-grade fear that hummed in the background of my entire childhood. My mother was his loyal lieutenant. She followed his lead as if his words were gospel, echoing his pronouncements and enforcing his rules with a quiet, unwavering certainty. She was a gentle woman in many ways, but her gentleness evaporated in the face of my father's authority. Her loyalty was to him, first and always. Any defense of me was a betrayal of him, so she simply never offered one. Then there was Becca, my sister, 2 years younger than me. She was the sun around which my parents orbited. She was the golden child, the living embodiment of every hope and dream they had. The contrast in how we were treated was so stark it was almost comical. Becca could set the kitchen on fire while trying to make microwave popcorn, which she actually did once, and my dad would laugh it off, ruffle her hair, and call it a valuable learning experience. I, on the other hand, forgot to mow the lawn one single Saturday because I was studying for a major physics exam, and I was immediately branded as irresponsible, lazy, and heading nowhere in life. That was the fundamental equation of our household. Everything she did was a sign of her inherent goodness and potential, while every action I took was further proof that I was a disappointment, doomed to make mistakes. If she passed an exam, it was because she was diligent, intelligent, and focused. If I passed an exam with a higher grade, it was a fluke, a stroke of dumb luck. If she broke a dish, it was an accident. If I broke one, it was because I was careless and disrespectful of their property. She was the polished trophy on the mantelpiece, and I was the crack in the foundation that threatened to bring the whole house down. I'd always known it was profoundly unjust, a constant, grating unfairness that I had learned to live with. But I never, in my darkest imaginings, thought she would take that dynamic and weaponize it in the way she did that night. It all started like any other Tuesday. I was holed up in my room, my ancient, sticker-bombed laptop whirring on my desk. I was trying to download some music from a sketchy website while simultaneously half-assing a history essay that was due the next day. It was late, probably past 11, and the house was quiet. Suddenly, my bedroom door flew open with such force that the knob slammed into the drywall, leaving a perfect, circular dent. Both of my parents stormed in, their faces contorted with a level of fury I hadn't seen since I'd accidentally backed the minivan into a neighbor's mailbox 2 years prior. My mother's face was flushed a blotchy red, and my father's veins were popping on his forehead, a terrifying roadmap of his rage. Behind them, hovering in the doorway like a pale ghost, was Becca. She was in the middle of a performance, so convincing she should have been handed an Oscar on the spot. She was pretending to cry, her shoulders shaking with manufactured sobs. "He stole it," she wailed, her voice thick with fake anguish as she pointed a trembling, accusatory finger directly at me. "I saw him. I saw him take it from Dad's wallet." "What?" I sat up straight, my mind struggling to catch up. The music I was downloading, the history essay, everything evaporated. My father was already rampaging across my small room, his eyes scanning everything like a detective on a low-budget cop show. He kicked aside a pile of laundry, yanked open my desk drawers, and then his eyes landed on my bed. He grabbed my pillow, lifted it, and there it was. A crumpled wad of bills, probably $300 or $400, was tucked underneath. I swear in that moment my stomach didn't just sink, it plummeted through the floorboards. I felt a cold, dizzying rush as the reality of the situation crashed down on me. This was a setup. A perfectly executed, devastating setup. "I told you," Becca shrieked, her crocodile tears now streaming down her cheeks in a torrent. "I told you he was a thief." My brain couldn't even process it fast enough. I hadn't touched his wallet. I hadn't even been in their room all day. But before I could string together a coherent sentence, before I could even begin to defend myself, my dad was in my face, jabbing his thick finger into my chest. "You have embarrassed this family for the last damn time," he roared, his breath hot and stale. "You think we didn't notice things going missing before? Little things? You think we're stupid?" I jumped to my feet, my whole body shaking. "That isn't mine," I yell, my voice cracking. "She planted it. She's lying." Why would I take money when I've been saving every penny I earn from babysitting and mowing lawns? Asked Mrs. Novak next door. I just cut her grass yesterday. Enough, he barked, a sound so loud it felt like it rattled the glass in my window frame. A liar and a thief. That's what you are. You made this house a joke. I desperately turned my gaze to my mother, searching for any sliver of support, any flicker of doubt in her eyes. But she wouldn't even look at me. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her lips pressed into a thin, disappointed line. She was a statue, a silent endorsement of his verdict. No questions, no hesitation. It was as if he had declared a new law of physics, and she had simply accepted it as fact. Meanwhile, Becca stood behind them, her head bowed in a posture of saintly sorrow. But I saw it. Just for a second, as my father started tearing my room apart, I saw the smirk. It was a tiny, fleeting flicker of triumphant joy on her lips before she masked it again with a sniffle. He was grabbing my belongings, my books, my posters, my clothes, and shoving them into a black trash bag as if I were some stray animal they were finally, mercifully, discarding. "Dad, please, it isn't true," I begged, my voice breaking completely now. The injustice of it was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. But it didn't matter. He snatched my rucksack from the corner of the room, dumped its contents onto my bed, and began stuffing it with a random assortment of clothes. My mom started to say something a weak, "Martin, maybe we should," but a single sharp glare from my dad silenced her instantly. Becca let out another dramatic, shuddering sniffle. "I'm scared to even be in the same house as him," she whispered, just loud enough for them to hear. "He gets so angry sometimes. What if he hurts me?" That single sentence cut deeper than anything else. It was a lie so monstrous, so poisonous, that stole my breath. I spun toward her, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What are you talking about? I have never, ever laid a hand on you." But the damage was done. My father's jaw clenched. "That's it," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Out. Now." They thrust the bags into my arms and practically dragged me down the hallway. Becca trailed behind us, and as we passed her, she leaned in and whispered into my ear, her voice a triumphant hiss. "I told you they'd believe me." When we reached the front door, my dad jerked it open. The cold November night, air hit me like a physical blow. I was barefoot, still wearing nothing but a pair of thin sweatpants and an old t-shirt. The world outside looked dark and alien. My dad shoved me hard onto the porch, and I stumbled, barely catching my balance. My sneakers were still by the door, and in a moment of pure instinct, I lunged and grabbed them just before he could slam the door completely shut. "You don't come back here until you're ready to admit what you did and apologize to your sister," he said, his voice low and definitive, each word a hammer blow. "I didn't do anything." I screamed, my throat raw and burning. "She's lying to you. She set me up. Don't you dare talk about your sister like that." My dad snarled through the crack in the door. "She's been nothing but good to this family. You're the problem, Kyle. You're jealous and you're bitter." The door slammed shut, the sound final and absolute, shaking the glass panes in their frame. For a few long moments, I just stood there on the cold concrete, the trash bag of my life hanging limply from my hand. I waited, a stupid, hopeful part of me expecting the door to swing open again, for them to say it was a terrible mistake. I was their son. They couldn't just kick out their own child over a handful of tears and some planted cash. But the door never opened. I sank down onto the porch steps, shivering, and looked out at the quiet, sleeping street. I wasn't just grounded. I wasn't just in trouble. I was out, exiled. A 15-year-old kid sitting outside his own house with nothing but a trash bag of clothes and a backpack. I knew then that my sister had one. She had their trust, their affection, and their unwavering, blind loyalty. And me? I was disposable. I remember clutching that flimsy trash bag as if it were a lifeline, my chest so tight I could hardly breathe. Part of me, the angry, wounded part, wanted to rush back to that door and pound on it until my knuckles were bloody, to scream until they were forced to listen. But another, colder part of me, the part that had been growing for years, knew it wouldn't matter. They had made their choice. And as I finally pushed myself to my feet, stepped off that porch, and started walking into the indifferent darkness, one thought burned in my mind with the intensity of a fever. They would always choose her lies over my truth. I wasn't the black sheep of the family anymore. I had been cut out of the herd completely. The first night was a blur of aimless walking. I just went around the block, then another, and another, until my legs ached and my bare ankles were raw from my hastily pulled-on sneakers. I wasn't even sure where I was headed. It was late, it was freezing, and I was a 15-year-old cliché, clutching a garbage bag like a runaway in a bad movie. I considered trying to crash at the local park, but the benches were soaked and glistening from the late-night sprinklers. Then, a name popped into my head. Lindsay. She lived a few blocks over. She'd been my best friend since we were paired up for a disastrous frog dissection project in middle school. I figured, maybe, just maybe, her parents would let me spend the night on their couch. I must have looked like a ghost when she answered the door. Her eyes widened as she took in a sight of me standing on her porch at nearly 1 in the morning, shivering in thin sweatpants and holding a trash bag. She didn't ask too many questions at first, just pulled me inside quickly, her expression a mixture of shock and pity. I mumbled something about a huge fight and getting kicked out. She didn't seem surprised, just incredibly sad for me. She gave me a blanket and a pillow for the floor of her room and a plate of leftover pizza. And that night, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks, the exhaustion finally overwhelming the anger and fear. Her mother, however, was not as forgiving. The next morning, she pulled me aside into the kitchen while Lindsay was in the shower. She wasn't mean about it, just direct and pragmatic. "Kyle," she said, her voice kind but firm, "you can stay for a couple of nights to get on your feet, but I can't afford to feed another teenager. You'll have to figure something out with your parents." I nodded, my stomach twisting into a tight knot, and pretended I had a plan. I didn't want to be a burden. On the morning of the third day, Lindsay's mother gave me a ride to school, and as I got out of the car, she gently told me that I couldn't come back that night. Her husband was uncomfortable with the situation. That was it. I stuffed my garbage bag into the bottom of my locker and spent the rest of the day pretending I had somewhere to go after the final bell. From then on, I entered the nomadic, uncertain world of couch surfing. A classmate from my English class, a guy I barely knew, let me crash on his lumpy basement sofa for a night after he saw me looking lost in the hallway. Another kid let me stay in his garage, but only for one night because his parents would freak out. I quickly learned that while people felt sorry for me, nobody wanted to get involved in the drama of my family. My problem was contagious. After about a week, I had run out of couches and basements. I had exhausted the pity of my acquaintances. That was when I truly became homeless. I started sleeping wherever I could find a sliver of shelter. For a few nights, it was behind a 24-hour gas station, in a little nook near the dumpsters where the bright fluorescent lights didn't quite reach. It smelled of stale beer and rotting garbage, but it was hidden. I used to be able to hide out in the public library until closing time, reading old magazines to stay warm, but the night security guard, a heavy-set man with tired eyes, found me snoozing in a corral after a couple of nights and kicked me out without a word. I tried sleeping in a stall in the school's locker room bathroom once, but someone came in for early morning basketball practice, saw my bag under the door, and by second period, the entire school knew. The hunger was, in many ways, worse than the cold. I had maybe $40 saved up from my summer of cutting lawns and babysitting. That money vanished in a few days, spent on greasy dollar menu hamburgers and stale vending machine chips. After that, I either skipped meals or tried to fill the aching void in my stomach with water from public fountains. My stomach would grumble so loudly in the quiet of my math class that kids would turn and stare. I just pressed my arms against my abdomen, hoping to muffle the sound, my face burning with humiliation. School, which should have been a refuge, became my own personal torture chamber. Becca had worked fast and efficiently. By the end of the first week, her version of the story had spread like a virus. Everyone had heard how I'd stolen a large sum of money from my own father, how I'd become violent and unstable, and how my long-suffering parents had no choice but to kick me out for their own safety. She painted me as a budding delinquent, a junkie in training. The social dynamics shifted overnight. Kids I'd known for years would physically pull their backpacks closer when I sat down near them in the cafeteria. Teachers would give me long, pitying stares that clearly indicated they'd already spoken to the counselor and been warned about the troubled kid. One afternoon, as I sat down in my arithmetic class, a girl named Sarah, who I'd always been friendly with, conspicuously moved her notebook and pencil case to the far edge of her desk. "Sorry," she whispered under her breath, just loud enough for the entire row to hear. "I just don't want my stuff to get stolen." A few kids snickered. I wanted to scream, to tell them the truth, but I knew it was useless. My credibility was zero. One day in the crowded hallway between classes, Evan, a popular basketball player, deliberately shoulder-checked me so hard I stumbled into the lockers. "Watch your hands, thief," he sneered. Out of pure reflex, I shoved him back. For a tense moment, I thought we were about to start swinging. A teacher rushed over and broke it up, but I was the one who got dragged to the office and given a formal warning. "One more incident like this, Kyle," the vice principal said, his eyes cold, "and you're suspended." I heard this narrative everywhere I went. Becca shines, I sink. She played her part to perfection. She'd make a point of loudly offering to pay for a friend's lunch in the cafeteria, saying something like, "It's so important to be responsible with money, unlike some people," while catching my eye from across the room. She'd give me a tiny, vicious smirk, then immediately resume her sweet, perfect daughter demeanor for her adoring audience. She was relishing every single second of my destruction. By the second week, I was a ghost in my own school, a pariah. Nobody wanted me around. I sat alone at a table in the corner, ate alone when I actually had food, and tried to project an aura of indifference, of not caring. But internally, it was eating me alive. The nights were the worst. I'd find a spot, curl up with my backpack as a pillow and my thin sweatshirt pulled over my face, and just pray that the cops on their late-night patrol wouldn't bother me, or that a drunk stumbling home from the bar wouldn't decide to have some fun with a homeless kid. The cold concrete seeped into my bones, making my back ache constantly. My shoes, my only pair, were perpetually damp and stinky from walking for miles every day just to kill time and stay warm. And all I could think about, in those long, dark hours, was that my own family had done this to me. Not strangers, not enemies. My parents. My sister. One night, I got desperate and attempted to sneak into the public library again. I figured if I concealed myself better, deeper into nonfiction stacks where nobody ever went, maybe they wouldn't notice. I found a spot behind a row of dusty encyclopedias and used my bag as a pillow, the hard floor of familiar misery. Around midnight, a bright, blinding beam of light hit me directly in the eyes. It was the same security guard. He just shook his head, a look of weary annoyance on his face. "You can't stay here, kid," he sighed, not unkindly. He ushered me out the side door, as if I were a stray cat he was shooing away. I stood outside, the door clicking shut behind me, and I wasn't sure where to go. The street was empty and slick with a fine mist. And for the first time, a truly dark and terrifying thought crept into my mind. Maybe this is what they wanted. Maybe they didn't just want me gone from the house. Maybe they wanted me gone for good. I ended up back behind the gas station, curled up among the garbage. The smell of decay, a fitting companion to the rot I felt in my own life. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was Becca's smug, triumphant face, pretending to cry as my parents shoved me out the door into the darkness. She had won, at least for now, but a tiny, stubborn ember of defiance still glowed inside me. Someone, somewhere, had to listen to the truth. I kept telling myself that someone, anyone with a shred of authority, would eventually see through the lies. Perhaps the adults at school weren't completely blind. Perhaps a member of my extended family would actually show some backbone. I was tragically, consistently mistaken. The next phase of my nightmare began with my father finding me. I'm not entirely sure how he knew where I was. Perhaps Becca, in a moment of twisted victory, had told him. Perhaps he just drove around the seedier parts of town until he saw the familiar sight of his failure of son. I was seated on a cold park bench, my hoodie pulled down tight over my face to block the wind, when the blinding glare of his car's headlights pinned me in place. He pulled up to the curb so fast I was afraid he was going to run me over. "Get in the car," he demanded, slamming his door behind him. His voice was a low growl. I stayed firmly rooted on the bench, my hands gripping the wet wood. I felt my gut tighten into a solid ball of ice, just hearing his voice. I wasn't scared anymore. I was just filled with a cold, hard rage. "Now," he repeated, his voice rising. I slowly shook my head. "Not unless you're ready to admit that Becca lied." His face contorted with fury, as if I'd just spat in it. "Don't you dare," he seethed. "Don't you dare talk about your sister like that. She's been through enough because of you." Through enough. The words exploded out of me. She planted that money. She framed me. And you just swallowed her story whole without even asking me a single question. His jaw tightened. He took a step closer, his large frame blocking out the streetlight, and jabbed his finger at me as if it were a weapon. "You're going to come home. You're going to admit what you did, and you're going to apologize to your mother and your sister. Or so help me, I will call the police right now and tell them you've been stealing from convenience stores, that you've been begging for money on the street. Do you understand me?" It was a threat pure and simple, to utterly ruin what little was left of my life. I clenched the strap of my backpack, the only thing in the world that felt like mine. "I'm not coming home to be treated like garbage again," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You can call whoever you want, but I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do." For a brief, terrifying moment, I thought he was going to hit me, right there in the empty park. His fists were curled into tight, white-knuckled balls, and his face was hot with a rage he could barely contain. But then, with a choked sound of disgust, he spun around, stormed back to his car, and peeled away from the curb, leaving me shaking in the sudden silence. That was the moment it truly hit home. He didn't want the truth. The truth was inconvenient. It was messy. It would force him to admit he was wrong. He just wanted control. He wanted me to bend to his will, regardless of the facts. The next day at school, I made one last desperate attempt to find an adult who would listen. I approached the school counselor, Mrs. Albright. I thought, hey, this is her job. Maybe she'll believe me if I just lay it all out, calmly and rationally. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair in her office, my heart racing. I told her everything, my voice quiet and earnest. I told her how Becca had always been the golden child, how she placed the money, how she'd been bragging about it to her friends, and how my parents had thrown me out without a second thought. She listened, nodding with that infuriatingly blank, therapeutic expression that counselors perfect. When I finally finished, my story hanging in the air between us, she let out a long, weary sigh. "Kyle," she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. I understand you're under a lot of stress right now, but making accusations against your sister without any evidence isn't going to help your situation. Your parents have already spoken to us. They're very concerned about your recent behavior. They told us they think you're becoming unstable. Unstable? That word hit me like a punch to the gut. As if I were a ticking time bomb rather than a scared, hungry kid sleeping outside gas stations because his family had betrayed him. I'm telling the truth, I insisted, my voice starting to quiver with frustration. She just shook her head, her expression unchanging. My advice to you is to focus on your schoolwork. The best way you can show your family that you're trustworthy is through your actions. So, basically, her advice was to suck it up and prove my innocence by being a perfect student while I was homeless. That's what she meant. I attempted one final angle. I used a precious quarter to call my aunt, my mom's sister, from a pay phone outside the supermarket. She picked up cheerfully, but her tone frosted over the second she heard my voice. As soon as I explained what had happened, I could feel her withdrawing through the phone line. "Kyle, honey," she said, her voice strained, "this really isn't something I can get involved in. Your parents are doing what they think is best. Maybe if you just told them you were sorry." I hung up the phone before she could finish the sentence. My own blood, my own family, didn't want to touch this. Everyone wanted the easy version of the story. Kyle is the problem. Becca is perfect. Case closed. That night, I was back at the gas station, my back against the cold brick wall, sipping on water I'd filled up in the grimy bathroom sink, hoping it would fool my stomach into feeling full. The neon opened, sign buzzed, and flickered overhead. Cars pulled in and out, their occupants oblivious to the invisible, shivering boys sitting in the shadows. And then I heard the voice that I despised more than any other in the world. "Wow, I didn't think you'd actually last this long out here." I looked up, and there she was. Becca. She was holding a can of Pepsi, looking casual and bored, as if she were just passing by and decided to say hello to her homeless brother. I just glared at her, too tired and angry to even speak. "Why are you here?" I finally managed to grind out. She took a long sip of her drink and smirked. "Curious, I guess. I wanted to see how long it would take before you came crawling back, begging them to let you in." My fists clenched at my sides. "Why are you doing this to me, Becca?" Her smirk vanished, replaced by a look of genuine, bitter resentment. "You think you had it so rough? Try being me. Mom and Dad never let me slip up. Not once. Every grade, every chore, every little thing I did was always under a microscope. And if I ever messed up, it was always, 'Don't be like your brother.' That's all I ever heard my entire life. Be better than Kyle." I just stared at her, completely bewildered. She continued, her voice low and steady with a conviction that was chilling. "Now, for once, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to prove anything. All I have to do is not screw up as badly as you. And honestly, that's the easiest job in the world. I'm not giving that up." "You're sick," I mumbled, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Her grin broadened, a truly ugly expression. "You know what's really sick? How easy it was. Everyone in this family, in this town, already thought you were the screw-up. I just gave them the proof they were looking for." I wanted to shout, to lunge at her, to do something, anything. But she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And if you keep pushing this, if you keep running your mouth and telling people I'm a liar, I'll make up something even worse. Something they won't just kick you out for. Then you won't just be homeless, Kyle. You'll be locked up." She said it so calmly, with such absolute confidence, that it made my skin crawl. She wasn't bluffing. She was already planning her next move, her next escalation. She then turned and strolled away as casually as she had arrived, as if she hadn't just threatened to completely and utterly destroy what little I had left of my life. And as I sat there, shivering in the artificial glow of that gas station sign, it finally dawned on me with a terrifying clarity. She wasn't just trying to make me look bad. She wanted to utterly erase me. That single, chilling thought lingered in my mind for days, a constant, looping echo. Every time I tried to sleep behind the dumpsters or spend hours walking around town just to waste the daylight hours, her words played back in my mind. Becca wasn't just glad I was gone. She wanted me to be eliminated, as if I had never existed in the first place. By the beginning of the third week, I had sunk lower than I had ever imagined possible. My $40 was long gone. My phone had been dead for over a week. I hadn't had a real, solid meal in at least 2 days. I was a walking ghost, lugging my pathetic tour garbage bag everywhere I went. It had become a part of me, a physical manifestation of my status. It wasn't even a proper bag anymore. It was more like a sign hanging around my neck that read, "Homeless loser." One rainy night, I tried to hide in the school library again. I reasoned that if I went deeper into the archives, behind the shelves of old yearbooks, I might be able to avoid detection for just one dry, warm night. But around midnight, a bright flashlight beam sliced through the darkness and landed directly on my face. It was the security guard. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength and marched me outside into the downpour. I already told you. You can't sleep here, kid, he said, his voice hard. You try this one more time, and I'm reporting you for trespassing. Then you'll be suspended. The rain started coming down harder after that. I just walked for miles, the cold water soaking through my hoodie and my cheap sneakers squishing with every miserable step. My trash bag, already weakened, finally gave up. The plastic tore, and half of my meager, damp garments spilled out onto the wet sidewalk. I just stood there for a moment, staring at them, before I stooped to gather them up, clutching the ruined sack to my chest. Even though everything I owned now smelled of mildew and despair, I couldn't let them go. I ended up huddling under the narrow awning of a closed laundromat, my stomach clenching with a hunger so intense it made me lightheaded. That was my breaking point. I sat there, shivering and soaked to the bone, thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is how it ends. I'll just disappear out here, and nobody will even notice or care. That's when Lindsay found me. She came running up the street, holding a small umbrella that was doing little to protect her from the deluge. Her hair was stuck to her forehead, and she was out of breath, as if she had been searching for a long time. Kyle, why didn't you answer your phone? I've been looking everywhere for you. My phone's dead, I murmured, the truth being that I hadn't had access to a charger in weeks. She crouched down next to me, completely disregarding the puddles that were soaking the knees of her jeans. You look awful, she said, her voice full of genuine concern. Thanks, I replied, attempting a weak laugh that came out as more of a croak. She pressed a crumpled, white envelope into my cold hands. Here, she said, take this. I frowned, confused. What is it? Just open it. Inside was about $60, mostly in small, crumpled bills. My throat clenched up, and I couldn't speak. Lindsay, I can't take this. You can and you will. She cut me off, her voice firm. It's my allowance money. I don't need it. You do. I couldn't even form the words to thank her. I just nodded, clutching the envelope as if it were the most precious thing in the world. She looked around, making sure no one was nearby, and lowered her voice. There's something else you need to know. Becca was bragging at a party last weekend. I heard her myself. She was telling people that she planted the money, that she set you up. My head snapped toward her, my heart suddenly pounding. She admitted it? Yeah, Lindsay said, her expression grim. But the worst part is nobody believed her. They all thought she was just joking, just showing off. A few guys even said something like, even if it was true, Kyle probably deserved it. It was like being kicked in the chest all over again. I deserved it. That's what people, my peers, thought of me. I got to my feet and started pacing under the small awning, a caged, furious energy surging through me. No one is going to back you up, Kyle, Lindsay said quietly. She's too popular. Nobody wants to cross her. And they all think you're already a lost cause. The silence that stretched between us after she said that said everything. It wasn't just my parents. My entire world had written me off. That night, as I sat in the doorway of a laundromat, dripping wet, my clothes stinking, and my stomach finally, blessedly full from a hot meal Lindsay had bought me, something inside me hardened. If no one in the world was going to stand up for me, then I would just have to do it for myself. That evening, after I used a few dollars to wash and dry my clothes at the laundromat and clean myself up as best I could in a gas station bathroom, I took my now slightly less disgusting garbage bag and started walking. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even really scared anymore. I was just done. Done being a victim. Done being invisible. Done letting her win. When I finally turned down our street, my chest clenched with a familiar, painful tightness. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. Neat white siding, cheerful flower pots on the porch, the place I had grown up. But it wasn't my home anymore. It was enemy territory. I waited across the street for a long time, the rain having slowed to a miserable drizzle, just watching the warm, yellow lights in the windows. Then, I took a deep breath and headed up the driveway. I was going to walk through that door and make them hear me, whether they liked it or not. My fist struck the solid wood of the front door 3 times, the impact stinging my knuckles. For a long, silent moment, nothing happened. Then I heard the sound of footsteps. The door creaked open, and there she was. Becca. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise, an expression that quickly twisted into her trademark sneer. Well, look what the cat dragged in, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I shoved past her before she could stop me, my wet shoes squeaking on the polished hardwood floor. I'm not here to stay, I announced, my voice louder than I intended. I'm here to talk. My mother's voice echoed from the living room. Kyle. A second later, she appeared in the hallway, drying her hands on a dish towel, her face a mixture of shock and annoyance. My dad followed right behind her, his arms already crossed over his chest, his face already turning red. Out, he said, his voice flat. Now. No, I replied, my own chest heaving with a mixture of adrenaline and fear. You're going to listen to me this time. You've believed her lies for long enough. Tonight, you're going to hear my side of the story. My dad took a step forward, looming over me. You watch your tone. You don't get to barge into this house and make demands. Watch my tone. I practically shouted, a wild, bitter laugh escaping my lips. You threw me out onto the street with a trash bag because Becca cried and waved a couple of $100 bills around. You didn't even ask me for my side of the story. Not once. Because we know you, my dad shot back, his voice sharp. You've always been reckless, Kyle. Always jealous of your sister. His words just fanned the flames. Jealous? Let's talk about that. Remember last year when she copied my entire science project, word for word, and the teacher called home? You punished me for letting her cheat. She cried, and you believed her. It's always the same story. She's the angel, and I'm the screw-up. It doesn't matter what actually happened. My dad's jaw clenched. For a fleeting second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a tiny spark of recognition, of doubt. He knew I was right. He had to know. But rather than admitting it, he doubled down, his pride too stubborn to bend. He took another step closer, the aggressive scent of his aftershave and his wrath filling the small hallway. Don't you stand here and disgrace your family. You've done nothing but pull this house down since you were a teenager. You want me to acknowledge we favored her? Fine, we did. Because she earned it. She keeps her grades up. She helps your mother. She stays out of trouble. You can't even keep a roof over your own head. Those words landed harder than any physical blow ever could. My fists curled at my sides, my nails digging into my palms, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I can't keep a roof over my head because you threw me out, because she framed me, and you believed her without a single second of thought. Behind him, Becca was leaning against the wall, sipping from a glass of water as if she were watching an entertaining TV show, a smug little smirk playing on her lips. I turned my full attention to her. Go on, I challenged, my voice shaking with rage. Swear it. Swear right now, in front of them, that you didn't plant that money. Look me in the eye and swear it. She tilted her head, her lips twitching as if she was trying not to laugh. Sure, she responded, her voice full of a flippant, mocking sarcasm. I swear. I pointed a trembling finger at her, my voice breaking. You hear that? You see that? She can't even take it seriously. She's lying to your faces, and you are still falling for it. My dad's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson, and his hands curled into fists again. And then, in a move that shocked even me, he grabbed a heavy glass tumbler from the entryway table and threw it at me. His aim was off, but it didn't matter. It shattered against the wall right next to my head with an explosive crash. Shards of glass rained down, a few sharp pieces slicing into my arm and my cheek. I felt a warm trickle of blood, but he just pointed a shaking finger at the door, his voice low and quivering with a wrath that had finally boiled over. Get out, he hissed. Get out before I call the cops and tell them you broke in and assaulted us. You want to keep making scenes? Fine. You can do it from a jail cell. I just stood there, my breath ragged, my chest pounding, my throat burning with unshed tears, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. You've made your choice, I said quietly, my voice raw. You picked her. You always pick her. And one day, you're going to see her for who she really is. And when that day comes, don't you dare come looking for me. The room fell silent, except for Becca's soft, derisive chuckle. Wow, she said under her breath, shaking her head. Drama much? I retrieved my pathetic, torn bag from the floor and turned toward the door. Every step felt like it was weighted down with lead. But I didn't stop. At the threshold, I turned around one last time, taking in the scene. My parents, frozen in their anger and confusion. Becca, smirking in her victory. You think I'm a problem? I said, Fina. But when the truth finally blows up in your faces, you remember this moment. Remember that I warned you. Then I wrenched the door open, stepped out into the damp, cold darkness, and slammed it shut behind me. The cool night air hit my face, mixing with the sting of the shallow cuts on my arm. I started walking fast, my jaw set hard, as if putting enough physical distance between myself and that house would allow me to breathe again. I had only gotten halfway down the block when I heard footsteps behind me, quick and irregular, as if someone were jogging to catch up. Wait up, bro. I spun around, my heart pounding in my chest, my hand instinctively reaching for the small pocket knife I had started carrying. And there she was, Becca, jogging toward me, as calm and casual as ever, her face glowing in the dim, yellow light of the street lamp. She was smiling, a wide, genuine smile, as if this were all just a fun game for her, as if my dad hadn't just tried to shatter me with a piece of glassware less than 5 minutes before. As Becca had stepped onto the porch after me, I thought I'd heard the faint squeak of the screen door opening again behind her, but I had been too preoccupied with her smug, triumphant smirk to pay it any mind. Now my stomach flipped with a new kind of dread. What do you want now? I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. She slowed to a walk, slipping her hands into the pocket of her hoodie with a relaxed posture, as if she were just out for a late-night stroll. Relax, she said. I just want to see how far you'd actually take this little dramatic exit. I glared at her, my fists still clenched so tight that my arms ached from my fingernails digging into my palms. Farther than you think. I'm done letting you run my life. Her grin widened, her teeth catching the light. You still don't get it, do you? No one is ever going to believe you, Kyle. You can scream, you can cry, you can bleed all over the sidewalk. It won't make a difference. To them, you will always be the screw-up, and I will always be the one they're proud of. Proud? I sneered, shaking my head in disbelief. Proud that you destroyed your own brother? Destroyed you? She repeated, tilting her head as if I'd just said something utterly amusing. Then her expression hardened, and her voice lowered, becoming colder and crueler than I'd ever heard it. I didn't destroy you. I just gave them the proof of what they already believed deep down. And you know what? It was the smartest thing I've ever done. My stomach turned, and my chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. Say it again, I said, my voice a low growl as I moved a step closer to her. She leaned in, her voice a triumphant whisper, as if she wanted to savor every single word. I framed you. I planted the money. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Watching you beg while I win, that's the best part. The words sliced through me like a razor. I could almost hear the blood rushing in my ears, feel every drop of actual blood dripping down my arm from where the glass shards had ripped into my skin. And then, another voice, a voice shaky with disbelief, pierced the silence of the night. Excuse me. We both froze like statues caught in a spotlight. My mom was standing at the edge of the porch steps, her face pale and ghostly in the dim light, her arms wrapped tightly across her chest as if she were holding herself together. She must have followed Becca out without either of us noticing. And for once, her eyes were not filled with anger or disappointment directed at me. They were fixed with a look of dawning horror on Becca. What did you just say? My mom repeated, just offended. Becca stiffened, the victorious smirk slipping right off her face, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated panic. Mom, it was nothing. He's twisting my words. Don't you lie to me, my mom snapped, walking down from the porch onto the sidewalk, her voice shaking with a fury I had never heard from her before. I heard you. I heard every single word. You admitted it. You said you planted the money. For the first time in weeks, I felt something crack open inside me, a tiny, fragile glimmer of hope. My own chest clenched, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. You heard her, Mom. You finally heard her. Becca's mouth opened and then closed again. For the first time in her life, she had no excuses, no phony tears, no quick, clever way to spin the story. She was caught, red-handed, in her own web of lies. Just then, the screen door smashed open against the frame, and my dad stormed out onto the porch, his face a thundercloud. What in God's name is going on out here? He bellowed. My mom turned to face him, her entire body trembling. She admitted it, Martin, she said, her voice choked with sobs. She just admitted that she framed Kyle. We heard her. My dad blinked, his face losing all its color. His angry forward momentum slowed, and he walked down the porch steps as if he weren't entirely sure he wanted to hear the answer. He looked at Becca, his jaw set like concrete. Is that true? Becca's lip began to twitch. She looked desperately between me, my mom, and my dad, panic flashing in her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to deny it again, to conjure one more lie, but something inside her seemed to break. Her expression twisted, and the words came out like venom. So what if I did? She spat, her voice cracking. I had to. You two always leaned on me, always expected me to be the perfect one, the good example. I couldn't risk him screwing that up for me, so I took care of it. I made sure he was the one you finally gave up on. The hush that followed her confession was so profound it felt like the air itself had become thick and heavy. My mom staggered back as if she'd been physically struck, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, she whispered. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her body shook with violent, silent sobs. My dad's jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists again, but this time they were directed at his perfect golden daughter. His face was flushed with a new kind of rage, his eyes steely, as if he were looking at a complete stranger who had somehow infiltrated his home. You let them throw me out, I said, my voice raw with the pain of the last few weeks. You watched them throw me out onto the street with nothing, because you cried and pointed your finger. And now you hear the truth, and you think it's okay. Becca crossed her arms, trying to hide the cracks in her composure with a shield of false bravado. Don't act like you're some innocent victim. You were always the mistake. I just made sure everyone else finally saw it. Her words hit me like another shard of glass. I clenched my fist tighter, not to hit her, but just to keep myself from collapsing right there on the sidewalk. The silence stretched on. My mom was sobbing openly now. My dad just stood there, looking utterly gutted, as if the very ground had been pulled out from under him. And me? I stood there in the middle of the street, bleeding and exhausted, but finally vindicated. They knew the truth now, but it didn't change the fact that they had chosen her over me when it mattered the most. It was far too late to undo the damage they had done. The immediate aftermath of Becca's confession was a tableau of stunned silence. My mother was frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks. My father looked like he had been hollowed out from the inside. Becca was trying to maintain her defiant posture, but her hands were shaking. For once, her carefully constructed performance had utterly failed her. I took a step forward, the drying blood on my arm feeling tight against my skin. My voice was rough, but it was steady. "You don't just get to stand here and act shocked," I said, my words directed at all three of them. "You did this. You threw me out with nothing. You let the whole neighborhood, the whole school, think I was a thief because it was easier for you to believe her fake tears than to trust your own son. You don't get to fix that with a few sorries." My dad snapped his head toward me, his eyes blazing as if he couldn't believe I was still speaking. "You watch your tone." "No," I replied firmly, a new and unfamiliar strength surging through me. "You don't get to tell me how to talk anymore. You lost that right when you threw a glass at my head. If you want me to even consider stepping foot back in that house, you're going to clear my name. Publicly." My mother blinked back her tears. "Publicly?" I nodded. "You're going to write a post on Facebook, on the church community page, in the family group chat. I don't care where. You're going to tell everyone the absolute truth, that I never stole a dime, that you spoiled Becca rotten and let her lies completely destroy my reputation. You're going to admit for everyone to see that you failed as parents. Otherwise, I'll do it myself. And trust me, I'll include every last detail, including the part where Dad tried to assault me tonight." My dad's face went red with impotent fury. "We don't air our family's private business online." I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "You already did. You did it the moment you threw me out onto the street with a trash bag. You let Becca's story run wild at school, at church, with all the neighbors. You were perfectly fine with letting everyone whisper about me. Now, you're going to be perfectly fine with undoing it." My mother's weeping intensified. She turned to my dad, her voice breaking. "Martin, he's right. We did this. We let this happen." She waited for him to respond, to take charge as he always did, but he just stood there, rigid and silent, his fist still tight, no words coming out. For the first time, his silence didn't protect her. It condemned her right along with him. My mother had always been his echo, but tonight, his silence wasn't enough. He was losing control, and she knew it. Her hands shaking, she pulled out her phone. "If you won't say it, Martin," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "then I will." My dad's glare could have cut glass, but she didn't stop. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the screen. "Tell me what to write," she asked, her eyes finding mine. Becca's head jerked towards her. "What? Mom, you can't." "Quiet," my mother snapped, her voice shrill with a pain and anger I had never witnessed from her. "You did this. You brought this on us." I walked closer, my heart pounding, and dictated the words slowly and clearly. "We need to make a public apology. Our son, Kyle, was wrongly accused of stealing from us. The truth is, our daughter, Becca, framed him, and we believed her without question. We have spoiled her, protected her from consequences, and we allowed her lies to destroy his reputation. We have failed him as parents, and Kyle deserves to be seen for who he truly is, not the scapegoat we made him." My mother typed every single letter, her hands trembling so hard I'm surprised she could hit the right keys. My dad stood there, his face a mask of stone, but he didn't stop her. She hit post. The words were out there. The damage could not be undone. Within minutes, her phone started buzzing, then buzzing incessantly with notifications. Comments started pouring in from relatives, from members of our church, from neighbors. "We had no idea. I'm so sorry, Kyle. It takes guts to admit something like this." My dad's face grew paler and paler as more and more comments piled up. He was watching his iron-fisted control over his family's image dissolve in real time. Becca finally snapped. "You just ruined my life," she shrieked. "Everyone is going to hate me now." My dad rounded on her, his voice low and full of a new, terrifying kind of menace. "No, Becca, you ruined your own life." Her face finally collapsed. There was no smirk, no fake tears, just pure, unfiltered panic. I stood there, bleeding and drained, but feeling lighter than I had in months. "You wanted me gone, Becca," I said. "You wanted me erased. Well, now it's your perfect little mask that's been erased. Now everyone knows exactly who you are." She stared at me, her voice shaky. "You think they'll ever forgive you for this? You'll always just be the one who caused all the drama." I stepped closer, my gaze locked on hers. "No," I said. "I'll be the one who survived it. You'll just be the liar who got caught." The silence was profound, broken only by my mother's muted sobs and the constant, relentless pinging of notifications from her phone. My dad looked 10 years older in that single moment. And Becca, for the first time in her life, she just looked small. I picked up my backpack from the sidewalk. "I'm taking my bed back," I announced to the broken statues of my family. "And you're not doing me a favor. You owe me. You threw me out. Now you're going to feed me, you're going to give me a roof over my head, and you're going to live with what you did." No one argued. No one tried to stop me as I walked past them, and up the porch steps. Inside, the house felt strange, alien, like I was walking into someone else's home. But I wasn't a guest. Not anymore. I had brought the truth into the light, and I had reclaimed the space they had stolen from me. As I dropped my torn garbage bag at the bottom of the stairs, I glanced back at them, all still frozen in the yard. You wanted a perfect daughter so badly that you were willing to turn me into the villain, I said, my voice low but carrying in the quiet night. Tonight, you told the world the truth. Don't ever think that fixes this. But at least now, everyone knows what kind of family you really are. And with that, I marched up the stairs, each step heavy yet steady. For the first time in weeks, I was going to sleep in a real bed. Not because they had allowed it, but because I had demanded it. They had cast me out once. But this time, I was the one who was choosing to stay.